Hey everybody, it's Anna and welcome back to my BookTube channel. Today we are going to be talking about the second Christopher Marlowe play that I have read this year. I started with my first Marlowe play last month. It was Edward II, which I read as part of Shaketember, and this October I read Dr. Faustus. I am reading from the Penguin Classics edition of Christopher Marlowe's complete plays, and I'll give you a little bit of background first on the play itself. So it seems that around the time of the 16th century in Germany, there was already this legend of an academic turned magician or sorcerer, Dr. Faustus, who bargains his soul or some part of his lifespan away to the devil in exchange for learning and power. And this play kind of takes the superstitious and magical elements of that original legend a step further and delves into, I think, more of a deeper critique of the type of dullness and ennui that can come from the tediousness of studying. The play exists in a couple of different textual forms. They're called the A and the B text. Basically, like, neither of them seems to provide like a complete picture of the play and what it is, but the version that is in the book that I have is based off of the A text. So the basic plot of this play is that Dr. Faustus is an academic who kind of grows bored with the tediousness of studying and finds dead ends in all sorts of academic disciplines, so he gets it into his head that he wants to basically start studying how to summon demons so that he can attain knowledge beyond what the typical human would be capable of obtaining. You know, things that people could not possibly have hoped to achieve at that point in history. It is interesting how much of that knowledge is stuff that we have now because we have the technology for things like space exploration. And then some of it is just your classic, I want to speak to famous people from the past, like Alexander the Great and Helen of Troy, which we don't have the ability to do still. So basically, Faustus learns how to summon demons. He actually summons a lesser demon called Mephistopheles, who accepts Faust's bargain. He bargains 24 years of his life in exchange for basically his unlimited knowledge and power. And throughout the course of the play, we kind of interact with people that knew Faustus and watch him go from being this sort of slightly standoffish, pompous person to someone who appears to be having like a total nervous breakdown or break with reality, and they're not entirely sure why. This play is also kind of reminiscent of a lot of the like high and low parallel action that I know from like Shakespeare's plays, where the actions of the more like learned or aristocratic characters are mirrored by the actions and the plots of the lower class characters, like the servants, the fool type characters. And we have a fool or a clown character in this whose name is Robin and his friend Rafe. And while Faustus is using his basically delusions of grandeur in order to try and do things like mess with the Pope and make the Pope think that the devil is possessing things in his dining room, we have these two lower class characters, Robin and Rafe, who are trying to basically copy what they see Faustus doing, to use magic in order to get unlimited amounts of alcohol or never have to work very hard or feed hay to their horses or to get the girl that they like to pay attention to them, something like that. That did kind of make the experience of reading this play a little disjointed, and I think some of that is because scholars believe that it was actually a few different authors who worked on this, and that perhaps some of the more jovial, joking scenes with the fools were not written by Marlowe, but were perhaps written by a co-author. The other thing that I really, really noticed reading through this play was the absolute glut of just erotic imagery that Faustus indulges himself in as he is beginning to describe the way that he wants to be ravished by knowledge, or the way I have up here the line that from the chorus at the very beginning, who describes Faustus as being swollen with cunning of a self-conceit, his waxen wings did mount above his reach. So that swollen with cunning kind of being a play on words in Elizabethan English, alluding to pregnancy, but also his like swollen big head, right? That he is swollen with his crafty designs. And this is kind of a comparison not to sort of the fall from grace that you would think of from like the Genesis story of Adam and Eve, but actually more something along the lines of Icarus, who dares to reach the sun and falls down in a blaze of glory, but is kind of remembered and valorized for this failed attempt, as opposed to vilified. And that's a theme that keeps coming back over and over again as you read this play, is Faust is not really like vilified by, I think, the like authorial narrative voice. And indeed, Faustus is also kind of indifferent to his own damnation and suffering. Like, he bargains away about 24 years of his life in exchange for his unlimited magical powers for a short period of time. And it's really only when other characters in the play come up to him and remind him, like, hey, you should probably repent before you die, because otherwise you're not going to be able to go to heaven. It's almost like he needs that prompting to remember that he's done something that's so like unorthodox, that goes against the like morality of his time and of the world that he lives in. And yet he doesn't seem too bothered by it when he is in the middle of fantasizing about making love to Helen of Troy, for instance, which is something that he does at the end of the play. Another thing that surprised me, or that I thought was like noteworthy reading this play, was in addition to Faustus seeming kind of ambivalent about the state of his own soul or salvation, he almost seems distant and removed from himself as a character as well. He constantly refers to himself in the third person, which, you know, that was brought to my attention in the introduction, but also really reminded me of like the medieval morality plays that preceded this, particularly Everyman, where Everyman is a character, like he is a man, but he is also an allegorical stand-in for every man, because the entire play, the morality play, is an allegory for what it is like for every person to travel through their lifespan and encounter moments of like sin or vice, and then moments of virtue and the chance to do good and virtuous things. And it is a lot more on the nose in Everyman. You have characters that are quite literally named like goodness, or named after the 7 deadly sins. People in Dr. Faustus have normal names like Wagner and Robin, and I guess Mephistopheles isn't really a normal name, but the human characters have very normal names. And yet, Faustus's own remove from himself, I think, puts some distance between him as a character and I guess maybe the individual interiority or psychology of Faustus, the individual. I just thought that was interesting, because Faust, or Dr. Faustus, has become shorthand for the type of person that, you know, plays with fire or accesses forbidden knowledge that they know that they probably shouldn't have. So the name has definitely taken on a life of its own, where it is frequently used as a stand-in for that type of behavior, as opposed to the individual himself. But I was surprised that that's already at work to an extent in the play, because Faustus always refers to himself as within the third person. So this is fascinating to me, just kind of like reading a little bit about his conception of morality. This reminded me so much of a different reading project I'm doing with Frankenstein now, but there is absolutely the equation of sort of beauty, goodness, and truth that's further complicated by the fact that Faustus asks the demon that he summons, Mephistopheles, to appear to him in a more pleasing form. So when he first summons him, there's a lot of Latin that goes into it, and then it says, "Enter a devil, Mephistopheles." Then Faustus says, "I charge thee to return and change thy shape. Thou art too ugly to attend on me. Go and return an old Franciscan friar, that holy shape becomes a devil best." So not only does Faustus have this moment where he does this like really impossible and forbidden thing of summoning a demon from hell, he's such a hater that he wants to send him right back initially, because he says that the demon is too ugly. And it is definitely the like irreverence of Marlowe that I find really funny, but also sharply on the nose in terms of social critique. That he says, oh, it's more pleasing for the devil to appear wearing the religious robes and vestments of a Franciscan friar, and that is an order that was founded by Francis of Assisi, so very much based on ideals of poverty and living simply and being at one with nature. And yet, what is this play? Written maybe 300, 400 years after the foundation of that order, that visual habit of the Franciscan friar has become shorthand for like a type of corruption or a type of more palatable evil. Here's another piece with the ambivalence that is like complicated by the text of the play. So this is when Mephistopheles comes back in the guise of the Franciscan friar, and he has just told Faustus that he is a servant to Lucifer, as in like Satan, the big bad one. And Faustus says, "Did not he charge thee to appear to me?" Meaning Lucifer made Mephistopheles appear. Mephistopheles says, "No, I came now hither of mine own accord." Faustus says, "Did not my conjuring speeches raise thee? Speak." Then Mephistopheles says, "That was the cause, but yet per accidens," meaning that he only showed up as an unforeseen side effect of Faustus's summoning. So then he says, "For when we hear one rack the name of God, abjure the scriptures and his Savior Christ, we fly in hope to get his glorious soul. Nor will we come unless he use such means whereby he is in danger to be damned. Therefore the shortest cut for conjuring is stoutly to abjure the Trinity, and pray devoutly to the Prince of Hell." Again, this is hilarious because of the amount of time Faustus spends studying Latin and poring over magic. Again, so much to the point that his colleagues and friends think that he's having a nervous breakdown. They don't see him for days and weeks. And it just so happens that the simplest thing he really had to do was basically a simple blasphemy against the Trinity, and that would have been enough for Mephistopheles to appear. So, further complicated in terms of the necessity of forbidden knowledge. There's apparently not much forbidden knowledge required to do forbidden things. And then again, from this same scene, after a bit more conversation, I was fascinated by the depiction of hell as not a discrete and different place, but hell being wherever the devils are, or wherever there is anyone who is separated from being at one with God or in the presence of God. So Mephistopheles begins by lamenting, saying, "Unhappy spirits that fell with Lucifer, conspired against our God with Lucifer, and are forever damned with Lucifer." Faustus says, "Where are you damned, Mephistopheles? In hell." Faustus, "How comes it then that thou art out of hell?" Mephistopheles, "Why, this is hell, nor am I out of it. Thinkst thou that I, who saw the face of God, and tasted the eternal joys of heaven, am not tormented with 10,000 hells, in being deprived of everlasting bliss? O Faustus, leave these frivolous demands, which strike a terror to my fainting soul." And it's such a strikingly modern depiction of hell, not as a literal place where you are being literally tortured for all of eternity, but as something that is a much more abstract concept. And at first, Faustus kind of scoffs at this idea and says, well, you should just man up, Mephistopheles, and learn fortitude from me, and then you're never going to really need to worry about being separated from God ever again. Of course, by the end of the play, Faustus comes to regret his bargain a bit, not so much because he feels remorse that he has forsaken God, but more so because he just wants to keep on living. He wants to keep on learning. It's as though like knowledge and the pursuit of it is his God, more so than the typical Christian God. I think some of the beginning of Faustus learning that hell is really just having knowledge of terrible things on this earth, we can see in this scene 10. So Faustus has basically become powerful enough that he is in the company of the Emperor of Germany, a knight, and different attendants. The Emperor is asking Faustus about his knowledge of the so-called black arts, and the Emperor really wants to meet and converse with the past dead, like long dead spirits of Alexander the Great and his dead lover, and he asks Faustus to do this for him. Faustus says, "My gracious lord, I am ready to accomplish your request, so far forth as by art and power of my spirit I am able to perform." But then a knight says, "I' faith, that's just nothing at all." And it is this knight whose incredulity and willingness to stand up to this very arrogant and powerful person that reveals a major flaw in Faustus's character, which is that really for all his knowledge, he is incredibly insecure. And the problem is just his own vanity and his own puffed up sense of self, not so much the fact that he's evil. So there's an argument between Faustus and the knight, and then Faustus says to the emperor, "My gracious lord, not so much for the injury he offered me here in your presence," meaning the knight, "as to delight you with some mirth, hath Faustus worthily requited this injurious knight. Which being all I desire, I am content to release him of his horns, and, Sir Knight, hereafter speak well of scholars." This is because at this point Mephistopheles has transformed the knight into wearing the cuckold's horns in order to embarrass the knight in front of the entire court and make him look like a fool. And kind of as Faustus begins to have this dawning realization of the fact that he will not be able to escape death, that he's condemned to die no matter the amount of knowledge he has, is when he really starts to exhibit this nasty mean streak against other people. I guess you just never know how someone is going to react to the news that their death is imminent. To his detriment, I suppose, he at least knew it was coming because he put a timeline on it. And then let's just end this discussion with some good thoughts on the end, like as a lot of the scholars and his other friends are beginning to realize what Faustus has actually done. All right, so the scholars are telling him to call on God for forgiveness at the hour of his death, and Faustus says, "On God, whom Faustus hath abjured? On God, whom Faustus hath blasphemed? Ah, my God, I would weep, but the devil draws in my tears. Gush forth blood instead of tears, yea, life and soul. Oh, he stays my tongue. I would lift up my hands, but see, they hold them. They hold them." The scholars all say, "Who, Faustus?" And he says, "Lucifer and Mephistopheles. Ah, gentlemen, I gave them my soul for my cunning." They say, "God forbid." Faustus says, "God forbade it indeed, but Faustus hath done it." And there is an incredible monologue that he delivers here at the end after the scholars all leave him. Before he exits with the devils, this absolutely killer set of lines. He says, "All beasts are happy, for when they die their souls are soon dissolved in elements, but mine must live still to be plagued in hell. Cursed be the parents that engendered me. No, Faustus, curse thyself. Curse Lucifer, that hath deprived thee of the joys of heaven." And in this case, I think what we're to make of this is just the knowledge that he has, that death is the end. You know, he seems to think that the animals who are just dissolving back into the elements don't suffer with the knowledge that when they die, that is the end of them. But also that the joys of heaven are equivalent not to, being around God, but being blissfully ignorant of the fact that there is no life after death. And so once again, it's not really like sin or evil or anything like that that's the main focus of this play. It's just the dawning knowledge of a man who thought he could outsmart everything, realizing he still has to come to terms with his own mortality because, like it or not, he's still going to die, and that is hell to him, and that is torture to him. Whew. It's heavy stuff. It's really good. I mean, I would really like to see this play staged at some point. I was reading through it and like looking at just the bare bones stage directions you get for something like this, really just wondering how on earth would you go about staging something like this. There's a lot of just technical challenges in the scant directions that we have. But I definitely think that this play's version of the Faust legend really speaks to something that other playwrights like Stoppard and Pinter and other, like more modern 20th to 21st century playwrights are exploring in terms of the relationship between mortality and the knowledge of it, and, what would, I guess, then become existentialism. It's not really quite at that point here in this play, but you can really see the ways in which like Marlowe was such an iconoclast of his time, and that he was not only thinking along these lines, but had the audacity to put that out on full public performance. This was a fantastic first read through of the play. I found it very fruitful, and I'm taking notes and annotations on all of these because I like to go back and like take notes in a different color ink or between pen or pencil so that I can see like what were my thoughts, what stood out to me across different readings. So at some point after I finish all 6 of these, I will probably do a reread project at some point. But yeah, that's Dr. Faustus. Wow. Really, really amazing. So we have, let's see, 4 more plays to choose from for the Marlowe Project here. So let me know, should we read Dido, Queen of Carthage next, Tamburlaine the Great, The Jew of Malta, or The Massacre at Paris? Let me know. I will probably take any advice there into consideration, but yeah, that'll be a project for November. So as always, thank you all so very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.